Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today, we are joined by Daniel Ortiz, who is an attorney and the founder of the Ortiz Law Firm. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. How you doing today?
It's great. It's a pleasure to meet you. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Ortiz Law Firm?
All right. So I am almost originally from Georgia, which is where I practice. I'm technically born in South Carolina. I've got Mexican heritage on my dad's side of the family. I am married to a Colombian, so hence I do immigration law. I speak a lot of Spanish doing that because I started learning Spanish from my grandparents, and it just so happens my wife, she was a Spanish teacher before she had our daughter. So that's a little interesting tidbit about myself. Ortiz Law Firm, we do immigration, criminal defense, family law. We also do wills, and we're just starting to do personal injury cases. Caveat there, immigration I do nationwide. All the other areas are state law, so that would only be in the state of Georgia. Immigration, however, is nationwide. I can practice in, on that Puerto Rico, Alaska, Maine, or California, I guess. So, we've been practicing. We've had our firm since March of 2008, so going on 17 years.
Now, you mentioned that you practice immigration law, nationwide. Are there any challenges that come along with practicing across state lines like that?
Not as much as you would think, because if it's a USCIS case, so somebody who's not in deportation proceedings, who's not at any risk of deportation, anything like that, they would just file their paperwork with what's called a USCIS lockbox, or sometimes with a National Benefits Center or certain processing centers. I mean, depending on the kind of application, that's where it's decided where everything's going to be sent to. And then if it's immigration court, thankfully, at least in most cases, they allow out-of-state attorneys to appear by video. Every now and then, you'll have to travel, but normally that would be for what's in immigration parlance called the individual hearing. Layman's terms, that's the trial date. Now, master hearing, that's a preliminary hearing, or kind of be the equivalent of an arraignment or calendar call in a criminal case, or maybe in a civil case too, at least in terms of the calendar call. So, but usually they'll let us do it by video. So it's not a big problem at all.
So when someone comes to the law offices of Daniel J. Ortiz, what are some of the problems that they are experiencing? What are some of the pain points, and what are some of the things that you're helping them solve?
Somebody comes to the law office of Daniel Ortiz. They usually have a question about, what kind of immigration benefits can they obtain?
Right.
Can a family member file a petition for them? Do they qualify for asylum? Do they qualify for cancellation of removal? So that's one thing. What do they qualify for? Or it's a family member, in the current environment, who's been picked up by immigration, who's been picked up by ICE. And, if they have a deportation order, can we reopen the case? Can we do a stay of removal? Now, if it's a pending case, of course, in the immigration court, can we get some kind of a bond? And then, of course, criminal questions, hey, I got a DUI, I've got a court date, coming up on such and such date. Can you represent me there? Can you try to get it lower down to a reckless? And also in the family side, divorce case, or the client may have already been served with a divorce, and so they're trying to fight the issues: child custody, visitation, child support. And sometimes that can be in the context of a legitimation too. If the child was born out of wedlock, and then, the father's trying to get his rights. So we handle all of that.
Now, I was going to say, working in immigration law, have you seen any sort of changes or developments in immigration law given recent political developments?
Absolutely. It's been massive. And I talk about this on all of my shows, my own, one that I'm doing on the radio too. I mean, it has been a change between night and day because, under the Biden administration, up until about 2024, as you're probably aware, essentially anybody was being allowed to come in. I mean, I'm not saying 100%, but, virtually everybody. It was basically, they'd be detained for a little bit, they'd be released and simply, wait for their court hearing. Now what's happening is, people with removal orders, instead of reporting to ICE, they're being actively sought by ICE agents, coming to their homes, especially, at least as far as I could tell, they really seem to be going after the ones that had a watch on or an ankle bracelet, because those are GPS devices. And so obviously they're the easiest to find, but really anybody who's missed a report date or, who has an order of removal, unfortunately it's open season there. And then also with the Venezuelans with the temporary protected status, there were two classes of TPS for Venezuelans, one that expired will expire April 2025, and another that'll expire in September 2025. The April 2025 class, they cancel the extension that Biden did, and then they canceled it, period. But because there's a 60-day, delay before it goes into effect, it effectively ends at the original time. So a lot of those people that had TPS are trying to figure out, well, what in the heck can I do? Can I file an asylum application? Can I file any other form of relief? Can I be the beneficiary of a petition? I'm, or if they're married to a U.S. citizen, for example. But it's really been night and day. And I guess my political comment on that would be, it's just really sad that, when the heinous acts of, 1 or 2% or less of people coming into the U.S. affects the 98% of people who are doing things right. Because I will just tell everybody in this audience, the vast, vast majority of people coming into the U.S., just want to work. They just want to contribute to the economy. And most of them don't have serious criminal records. Many don't have criminal records at all. So, and what you saw, like, for example, in the Lake and Riley case and, a couple of others that have been high profile, I mean, that is not in the majority. But like, as I always say, the 98, 99% of people doing things right, I mean, they're paying the price for, the acts of that, 1% who were obviously not doing things right. And it's a shame, but it is what it is.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point that you just brought up. And I'd like to mine a little further into that. Can you speak a little bit about how immigrants are helping the economy?
Absolutely. Many restaurants that I go to, just whether, and not the ones you would necessarily think of, not just Mexican restaurants or, Colombian restaurants or Venezuelan restaurants, but even just your, run of the mill steakhouse or, some of your fancy dining. I mean, a lot of the waiters and waitresses there, I mean, they're working on a work permit. So, many and most employers obviously require a work permit. So, many of those people are doing an excellent job. I mean, they may lose their job if they lose their work permit, if they lose their TPS, for instance. Obviously, agriculture, that goes without saying. What percentage of people, picking our corn and our strawberries and our apples? I mean, how many of them are, foreign born? How many are from here? I mean, it would really, it could be a massive supply chain disruption. And ultimately, that's going to be an increase in our prices, which is the contrary of what the current president is saying. Well, I'm going to come in there and we're going to, lower prices at the grocery store. I don't see, how going after people who are working in our agricultural economy is going to improve grocery store prices. But what do I know?
No, this may be a little bit of an off-track question, but I think it kind of fits with what we're, speaking about here. Do you have any thoughts on the Gulf of America change?
Oh my God. I mean, it's just really this totally extremist thing of, okay, well, everything's, got to be under this, America First concept that, I guess Trump first created back in 2015, 2016. And I agree with, having more manufacturing and more jobs in the United States. I mean, that's good for our people. That's what I want. But, going to the extreme of changing these names that have been around for, 100 years or 200 years, I don't know how long it had been called the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
It's like, I mean, changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America is not going to create jobs, and it's not going to lower prices at the grocery store.
Right.
Just saying.
So looking forward to the future, right? Where do you think maybe in the next 5 years, or I guess 4 years or whatever, where do you think the space? How do you think the immigration law is going to continue to change, or what do you think immigration law is going to look like? Say 5 years down the line, 4 years down the line.
Well, 4 years down the line, I mean, we'll
Right.
certainly
That's
we'll have a new president, obviously by then.
right.
Trump will be term limited at this point. For
Right.
those of you who don't know what term limited means, that means a president, according to the Constitution, there's a constitutional amendment after Franklin Roosevelt's presidency. He was the 32nd president. And after that, because he had served 3 terms, I believe, and, they decided to limit it to 2 terms. So basically 8 years. But, up at that point, it's just really hard for me to say because I think Trump is inherently unpredictable. I certainly, didn't have my head in the sand. I knew it was a possibility that he would get rid of TPS for Venezuelans. I did not expect him, however, to do it that quickly, especially since the whole campaign was more like going after, immigrants with a criminal record. And by definition, people with TPS either don't have a criminal record at all, or at most 1 misdemeanor, because they wouldn't have qualified for it in the first place. If they had a criminal record, it would have been denied. So, but I don't even want to begin to try to get a crystal ball on what I think Trump will do. My prediction is I can't imagine him doing anything that would be beneficial to immigrants based on everything. Then again, I do know that back in the 1980s, when nobody expected it, Ronald Reagan passed a massive immigration reform back then. So my guess is Trump will not do the same thing, but I hope to be pleasantly surprised.
Right. And can you tell us a little bit, I guess, when someone comes to your firm, right? When someone comes to you and needs your assistance and needs your help, is your approach to immigration law, is it sort of a one size fits all approach, or do you really have to kind of custom tailor your strategies dependent upon the case and the individual?
I really have to customize my strategy based on the case because, take for instance, I'll do a simple example here: asylum. And, asylum is a form of relief or a form of status that if you win the case, it'll provide a pathway to a permanent residency, or in plain English, green cards, and eventually to citizenship. But obviously, in order for that to happen, you have to qualify for it. And so there has to be persecution, and that persecution has to have happened because that is, there's a nexus, there's a connection with it based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, right? So, and persecution is not just, I got one threatening text message, or, somebody looked at me badly while I was walking, or somebody pushed me. I mean, persecution is a level of harm, which, I mean, the court doesn't define it this way, but it has to be extreme. They do define it as, quote, mere threats and harassment are not enough for persecution. So you have to have that. And then it also has to be on account of, one of those 5 categories I mentioned. So somebody, for example, who was the victim of, say misdemeanor domestic violence in their country, or what would be the equivalent of that, as bad as it is, might not qualify. Why is all that I just said relevant to your question? Simple. Somebody comes in, they're like, oh, I'm from El Salvador. Oh, no, nothing really happened to me, but I'm just afraid of the government, They would not qualify for asylum because it has to be something, a personal, subjective fear. On the other hand, somebody from Venezuela comes in and, they were attacked or targeted 7 times by colectivos. That's basically um, essentially gangs working at the behest of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. And the atrocities that happened were because they were a member of one of Venezuela's political parties, like maybe Voluntad Popular, maybe
Right.
Nuevo Tiempo, maybe Primera Justicia, that's First Justice in English. So obviously that person would qualify. So it just really depends on the facts of each individual case. And immigration law does tend to be very, very fact specific. So there's really not a one
Right.
size fits all.
Right. Now, what is that? I guess, I mean, I'm interested, because everything does have to be so custom tailored. What does that sort of initial discovery phase look like when you're trying to get all the facts of a client's case and all the facts of their circumstance?
Well, there's some facts that or information that I can get immediately when they come in, because a lot of times if it's immigration court, they'll have a notice to appear. So they'll have a certain court date and there will be certain allegations against them. It'll say when they entered the country, which is very important for both purposes of asylum and cancellation of removal and many other forms of relief. And then there's some things like anything that's been filed with the court that they don't have that I won't know until I file my entry of appearance, until I
Hmm.
come in as the attorney of record on the case. And then thankfully the immigration court has an online system that you can see where everything has been filed. So, I go online into their system, which is called ECAS, and it'll show everything that's been submitted with the courts. So post pandemic, just with all the technological advances, it's been much easier to go through the discovery process, because it used to be you had to drive down to all the way down to the court, go into a back room and then review the file page by page. And I think they gave you a limit of 25 pages for what you could copy. But thank God we don't have to do that anymore.
Right. Right. Now, I'm curious, what inspired you to get started in immigration law? And was that sort of where you began with your career, or did you transition into immigration law?
Oh, that's where I began my career.
Hmm.
So basically, I was a pre-med student actually, my freshman year, my sophomore year at Vanderbilt, and then I went to a study abroad in Santiago, Chile, and just fell in love with speaking Spanish. And I came back, and it's almost like God had a vision for my life. And I was just
Hmm.
like, I want to help immigrants. I mean, it was literally just that, because I want to help, bring people here. I mean, obviously people who are doing the right thing that, want to help contribute to our economy. And I just think are good and decent people. Like, I think they should have a chance.
Well, and I'd like to touch on that too, because I think that that's really interesting what you just said. Is you're really invested in helping people. Is that attribute, is that personality, that characteristic, that trait, I guess is the right word I'm looking for? Is that something that's just inherent to you as a person, or is that something that you've kind of learned to cultivate along the way?
I think actually that it's maybe a little bit of both. Um, I think, just, through my faith and through my beliefs, I think I'm naturally a caring person that, I like to put myself in other people's shoes. But I also think, on the other hand, that seeing people in the situations that they're in right now has also added to that. Because, when I was growing up, it was one thing to see it on television, or one thing to hear about it, or one thing to read about it in a college textbook, and quite another thing to actually experience it, like actually going down to the jail, seeing what these families really go through, seeing what happens when somebody gets deported, or and the alternate, just the joy, of somebody getting their citizenship. Recently I had a client who had Alzheimer's, and we had to get a guardianship for her, so that her daughter-in-law and son could take care of her. And she
Mm.
had a citizenship interview, and they actually interviewed the daughter-in-law. And we had a months and months long, over a year long court battle on that guardianship. And she just got her citizenship. So just seeing the joy on that family's face, and just knowing that you're making a difference, I would say
Right.
that was something I kind of learned in the in the line of business. But it was also something I think inherent in me just through I think how I was raised and through my faith as well.
Well, and I have to imagine that in this practicing this type of law, I have to imagine that there are times where you also experience negative outcomes, right? And
Um,
yeah, can you speak about those and how that, what that feels like, I guess? Because I'm wondering, are there times where you have to sort of compartmentalize and say, I got to keep work over here and my personal life over here, or else these two things are going to, clash and I'm going to, be thinking about this or.
it's absolutely, I would say, every single time where an immigration judge denies a claim, and especially if it's good person, no criminal record at all, but didn't quite meet the standard, and then they're asking, but why do I have to go back? If I'm a good person, if I've been doing everything right, and I just have to explain. I mean, yeah, I understand that. I know that you're a hardworking person, and you know, and that you've been doing everything right. You haven't gotten any trouble with the law, but the requirements of immigration relief, are what they are. One of the harder ones for me to explain is in cancellation of removal. One of the requirements at trial is exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to a qualifying family member, and that's another discussion what that means. But
Right.
but the exceptional, extremely unusual hardship, that has to be like, we're talking like kidney failure or
Mm.
cerebral palsy, or maybe suffers from like epilepsy, like those kind of things. And so sometimes I'll get questions like, if the judge didn't approve the case, well, why? My family members, they're going to be sad. And like, yeah, I'm the court didn't deny that there was hardship, but the hardship has to be exceptional and extremely unusual. So I think it's for me, they kind of intersect in a union. I mean, I got to be sympathetic toward the client, but I've also got to explain them the facts. So I guess it's explaining the facts, but in a sympathetic way, and the hardest ones obviously are the clients that I've known, I guess, for the
Right.
longest amount of time. And, that's difficult because, I mean, we are human, and, we make friendships and, meet people. And that's one of the greatest things about this job, I think. But, you know, just because you have to compartmentalize one of the things doesn't mean we don't get sad if it doesn't go right.
Well, and I think these issues that we're discussing, I mean, they're obviously complex issues, they're political issues, they're issues that people, sometimes when you speak about them, people kind of get a little uncomfortable talking about these kind of things. And, most of us, most people trying to, wrap their head around these kind of issues don't have sort of the day-to-day inside look that you are uniquely positioned to see. And I'm wondering, is there anything, that you would like people that are maybe outside of your industry to understand, or wish that people would understand more, or wish that was more well known about this issue?
Um, my biggest thing that I would tell people, to all of my listeners, is we need a middle of the road approach to immigration, because,
Mm.
on one side, there's this whole thing about completely open borders. And, obviously, I mean, we are a sovereign nation, and, I want people to have their status here. I want them to be able to earn it. I want them to be able to get it. But the fact is, I mean, the nation has borders. On the flip side of the coin, there are these people out there. It's just like, deport everybody, deport everybody. And I'm like, how are you going to say that to, these families who have been here for 20 years, just hardworking, many of them who have learned English? I mean, so there's got to be a middle ground. I mean, yes, we've got to be, fair to the people, who have done things, as they say, quote unquote, the right way, have gone through the procedures. But I also think, there should be an earned system of legalization. If you don't, get in trouble with the law, if you don't have a bad criminal record, if you're paying your taxes, if you're paying your child support, if that's what you owe, and you're taking care of your family, I mean, there's got to be a way to earn legalization. And, to be very
Right.
clear, I mean, I'm not saying, amnesty. I mean, because, again, I don't think that would be fair to the people who are doing it correctly. But I do think there should be a way to earn it. But unfortunately, our political system is just so damn polarized right now
Right.
that, um, people, on the open borders side probably are like, oh my gosh, but that sounds like too much work to do. And then people on the deport everybody side, it's like, oh, you're giving them amnesty. I'm like, no, I just want a common sense approach. That is all
Right.
I'm asking for. Um, you know, my first internship that I ever did was actually studying a proposed reform that George W. Bush wanted to pass back in 2006. It had a lot of good stuff in there, like such as a guest worker program. Did mention things about earned legalization. That was pretty much the first thing I ever touched in immigration. But, you know, I guess it's hard for me to be optimistic because it's been 19 years since that, and just the extremes on both sides of the political spectrum, always turn something down. So I would just rather get something done that's, that everyone benefits from, as opposed to just this, back and forth. But, you know, I I really don't know if it's going to happen. I want it to happen, but I don't know.
Looking back over all the people that you've helped, I mean, I imagine that you just have hundreds and hundreds of stories from working with people, through the firm and everything. Can you share with us, is there one story that really stands out where you saw a really positive transformation in someone as a result of your help and guidance?
I'm trying because I've got so many cases, I guess, that I'm working
Right.
on. I mean, one of the cases that I most remember was somebody who had their tourist visa. It was literally about to expire. And so we were able to do an extension of that tourist visa for another 6 months. And we didn't get the positive reply on that tourist visa until a couple of days before the second one was about to expire.
Oh, wow.
And then in the nick of time, we submitted the adjustment of status. That's the application for the green card. And we won on the case. And I remember going out to dinner, me and my wife, and then the client, and just to everybody. And it was the most just phenomenal thing ever. It was just the greatest feeling. And yeah, I'd say that's one particular case that comes to mind, but I've got a zillion other ones. I could probably spend hours talking about that, but there are a lot of others.
And if there was a piece of advice that you could share with someone in the position if someone was in the position that they would need your help and guidance, need the help of an immigration lawyer, an immigration attorney, what is a piece of advice you would share with them?
I would say, several things. Have an immigration attorney in mind if you don't have status here right now, or even if your immigration court is pending, especially if you have an order of deportation, and get your passports updated. Because, we just had an experience. We tried to do a stay of removal for somebody, and they were requiring a passport, but obviously the person was detained. So how in the hell are they going to get the passport if they're detained?
Right.
And, obviously I think the ICE officer in this particular case was stacking the deck, making it impossible. They knew what they were doing. But I would say, get your passport and, have an immigration attorney in mind. I'm about to have to step back into the office now because I got a couple of appointments here coming up.
Absolutely.
But I really enjoyed talking with you, Adrian.
Absolutely.
This has
been absolutely fantastic. Just to kind of close this off, where can the people find you if they need your services and need your help?
They can call me 404-343-0091, 404-343-0091. I'm also on the web at danortizlaw.com, and that's danortizlaw.com. And if you're in the Atlanta area, you want to swing by the office, 570 Colonial Park Drive, Suite 310, Roswell, Georgia 30075. Again, that's 570 Colonial Park Drive, Suite 310, Roswell, Georgia 30075. We are also on Facebook. We're on Instagram, so you can pretty much find us anywhere.
Dan, thank you so much for stopping by the show. That was a fantastic conversation, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian. Have a good day.
Same to you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.